everybody, and welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. In today's episode, my co-host is a friend of the network, a writer, a comedian, and a commentator on all things pop culture. It is none other than Guy Branum. And on top of that, before we go, I am going to talk about, I'm going to say a surprisingly related conversation alongside the one that I'm about to have with Guy about the new Amazon show Reacher and the delightful homoeroticism that comes with that programming. And so I'm excited to get into that, so stick around for it. But yes, with me today is a man who has written for shows like The Mindy Project and Chelsea Lately. His book is called, this is an all-timer title, My Life as a Goddess, a memoir through unpopular culture. He will be starring in Billy Eichner's forthcoming movie, Bros. And that's right, Guy Branum, is there anything else that the people need to know about you before we get started? Did I leave any crucial details behind?
No, those are all wonderful things to say about me. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And you have brought delicious characters from one of my honest-to-God favorite movies today. Mm-hmm. We are talking about David Lynch's Dune from 1984. Yes. What is the most streamlined summary of Dune you could give?
Okay, this is impossible because every version of Dune has like 9 different forms of exposition that are going on, and also it still doesn't make sense. The most powerful resource in the universe is a spice that can only be grown on one planet. Mm-hmm. And the Emperor attempts to make a political play by handing the planet over from an evil fat gay guy to an upright duke. And the fat gay guy is so good at being a fat gay guy, he kills the Duke and takes over the planet. And then the Duke's wife and his son have to go march off into the desert to figure out whether the Duke's son is the Messiah or not. Spoiler, he is the Messiah. Also, the strength of the base of the pillar.
That's perfect. That is perfect. And there are 2 characters you have mentioned as being important in this conversation, and who are we discussing today?
Well, I think, for the idea of feeling seen, it's such an interesting conversation because for so many people who look like them just weren't in movies for such a long time. But I feel like when you are a queer person, it is also about perspective, but I'm also a really fat person. So it impacts, that aspect of like, really fat people have been in media for all of time, but in a very sort of like narrow category of roles. So the characters that I presented to you were the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen and the Reverend Mother Helen Gaius Mohaim.
Wow. Wow. Incredible. Did you watch this movie when it came out and you were like, I'm drawn to this? Or was this a later in life watch?
Like, I saw it when it came out. I was excited for it. The thing is like, when you were a little boy in the early 80s, there was such a model for, like, they only made Dune because they were trying to make their Star Wars. And, they were like selling action figures and they were hyping people up as though it were Star Wars. And then you watch, it's a goddamn David Lynch movie based on, a fucked up and complex set of books that aren't trying to tell a magical story of good's triumph over evil. But, like practicalities triumph over other practicalities. Like it's realpolitik. And so it was one of those things that I went and saw as a child and I was like, what the fuck is this? This is amazing. I forget whether I saw it, because I would have been 8. I forget whether I saw it in the theater or on home video, but was just like,
what an experience.
I thought it was amazing when I saw it.
Yep.
And the thing is like when you are a little boy and you're seeing so many little boy adventures, there is the weird, and especially a little white boy, there is the temptation to think that like you're the man, like you're this person going on this adventure. And I think I always had a distance from that I didn't quite understand. The thing that captivated me about that movie was like the Reverend Mother Helen Gaius Mohayim.
Uh-huh.
This is the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohim. She is going to observe you.
Like, you know, it really was the Bene Gesserits and all of that world and the complexity and the culture. And it was over time that my understanding of and my relationship to the Baron Harkonnen evolved.
The Duke will die before these eyes, and he'll know that it is I, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who encompasses his doom.
Okay, so I was going to ask what the sort of sequence of events was, if there was a simultaneous recognition among both, or if you sort of realized in time links between one and sort of then the other.
Like, it's really hard because the capacity to identify with a villain, who is, particularly queer villains, is, I think, something older and more sophisticated. Like, one of the most amazing pieces of culture on the planet is, do you know who Cola Skola is?
No. Oh, like, Cola Skola. Oh, the comic.
Yes.
The incredible. Yes, absolutely.
They are like this angelically voiced comic in New York, and they posted a video of them at 3 singing from The Little Mermaid. And it starts off with them singing as Ariel in Part of Your World. And it's like so sweet and so beautiful. I mean, it's like a child's angelic voice. But then they start singing as Ursula, and the child just comes alive. Like, they are just so excited. And it's, you know, it's one of those fascinating things that I think happens in all of us, where you connect, but you're scared of the way that you connect, and you're scared of what it means. But I do think that the power of, I forget the actor's name, but the performance of the actor who plays the Baron Harkonnen.
I believe that is Kenneth McMillan?
Yes. It is so thick and robust, and magnificent, that from the first time I saw it, I knew it had power. I mean, the thing is like, you know, in one of the Baron's scenes, his nephew Fade the Rotha, it's Sting walking out of like steam wearing a metal Speedo, and like a rigid metal Speedo, and he's just
glistening. His body is covered in sweat.
And when we've crushed these people enough, I'll send you, Fade. Lovely Fade.
And, like, the Baron salivates over him. And, like, God knows Sting's body had a power over me even at 8. But sort of like that moment of like open indulgence and lascivious interest was like fascinating, at least. And over time, I began to understand the wonderful power inherent in that. Like, there are so many similarities between fat villains and queer villains, because they do both represent this, like, unabashedly coming from the unnatural. People who are not participating in the normal, ordered, like, heteronormative, progress of a hero. They are somebody who is unabashedly representing that which is wrong. And so, like, they're the only people who get to enjoy it or have joy. Like, if your only options are being pathetic or unholy, like, I'd kind of rather go with unholy. You know,
completely.
And there's also the really interesting way. I mean, one of the things that we're going to have to talk about is the way that the current set of Dune movies by Denis Villeneuve, like, attempt to manage this in the worst possible way, which is casting a straight actor and then putting a prosthesis upon him. So that he is not the horrible creature that is being represented. It was so weird when I started, like, making noise. And it was like in a half joking way about the fact that they had cast a non-gay, non-fat actor to play this, like this most delicious of roles. And also like put him, that I was going to have to watch a video about the hours of prosthesis he went through to look like me.
Right,
like the end product is just like me. Like they're trying to get what's disgusting about my neck and really put a finger on it. And there were all of these people who were Dune stans who, like, it was a bunch of dudes being like, you could not have read the books. And it's like, fuck you, motherfucker. I read 3 or 4 books too far. It was like, you know, he's not gay. He's a pedophile. And it's like, well, that's not going to come up in these movies. It's not going to be a thing. But just the notion that both his sexual desire and physical body were so abject.
Yeah.
Like, ha ha ha, this guy is saying that that's good representation. It's like, no, I'm not saying it's good representation. I'm just saying it's the only fun thing we have.
Yes.
Yeah. So, like, please let me have some of this fun thing. You know, it's like, as a gay guy, sure, I'd love to steal Ursula, but no, like, Ursula belongs to the ladies.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And it, you know, for me, the new Dune was vibes. It was beautiful and it was vibes. But, like, you can find a fandom for anything on Twitter. And so it was fun in the lead up to that being like, hey, where are my Lynch Dune stands at? And people being like, me, I've been here the whole time. And it, like, the thing I missed the most about it was the maximalism of the 84 movie.
Okay.
And there is something inherently queer about that kind of maximalism. You can't tell me otherwise. I went
in on a whole journey about it. I was a friend of mine who is a very respected cinematographer, director of photography. His comment on Dune was, it is too in good taste. Like the Villeneuve, like, and he and another guy were talking, and they were comparing
it's so classy.
And it's like an ad for like the best hotel in Utah. And I started coming to this point of like, what is there necessary space for camp in sci-fi? Lynch's Dune has these elements of broad camp.
Yes.
Like, you know, so much in the Baron, but also it was so much fun to show the box scene to a friend of mine who had never seen it before, who's a filmmaker. So the box scene, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's like the Reverend Mother Helen Gaius Mohaim's one big scene. She shows up to determine whether Paul Atreides might be the Messiah or not.
Put your right hand in the box.
What's in the box?
Pain.
So she has him put his hands in a box that is filled with progressive and infinite pain, and she holds a gom jabbar, which is a poisoned knitting, like it's either a poisoned knitting needle or in the Lynch film, it is a poisoned thimble. Like, is there anything?
It is a thimble.
Yes. Like, more magnificent than having these deadly women come with sort of like homicidal like sewing equipment. And, you know, she holds it to his neck. But it's a scene where, like, it is not a funny scene, but every line is a setup or a punchline. Like, it is just like...
I hold at your neck, the gom jabbar. This one kills only animals.
Are you suggesting a duke's son is an animal?
Let us say, I suggest you may be human.
Are you suggesting I might be an animal? No, I am suggesting the possibility that you might be human.
Many men have tried.
They tried and failed?
They tried and died.
Like, it is just hits. And it's like a little ridiculous and outsized. And then you see like the scene with Charlotte Rampling in the Villeneuve Dune film is one of the best scenes that's there.
Absolutely.
But it also just doesn't swing for the fences of the bathhouse the way that the original does. And
what a shame, what a loss that is.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, but we have the Lynch Dune. We'll always have it. Yeah, and so, like, at the same time as sort of, like, deeply identifying with this, like, villain who is sucking the marrow out of life on his own terms, there was also just sort of this fleet of hyper-competent, scheming women who were achieving things through all of the terms that don't make sense in sci-fi action.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, you know, that the Dune films embrace that their wizards are these ladies. And I also think that Lynch gave us a version of them. You know, other versions, the sci-fi series or Villeneuve, have really embraced some of the things like veiling or like the very long, heavy hair.
Yeah.
And like Lynch makes them so magnificently beautiful in a 1940s kind of structured way. No,
fabulous.
They actually kind of look like a car. Like they always kind of look like a car from the early 50s. And sort of like, you know, like that glamour, the possibility of having scheming glamour really appealed to me.
Scheming glamour, the dynasty of it all.
Yes, yes. Lady Jessica is like a femme fatale who starts out already turned, you know? And the one thing I did really like about the new Dune films was that Rebecca, what's-her-name, just never stops crying.
Rebecca Ferguson she's crying or doing the voice.
Yes, no, she's outsized. Well, and like the voice, I talk about the voice in my book. The voice was just one of the most captivating ideas to me. That like their magic, their power is just being able to read you so well that they can say something in exactly the way that you can't resist it.
Yeah.
You come here.
She's using the voice.
Like, I was just captivated, and I was like, how do I be that lady?
The Bene Gesserit are to me, they're the only thing in the new movie that comes even close to, as you said, swinging for the fences of the bathhouse in that way that, like, the new Dune makes me feel like you can't actually impeach 84 Dune on the grounds you thought you could, because it's like, why are you critiquing a drag show like you would critique a film? Like, this is, you are implying the improper rubric of assessment to this movie, because what it is doing is somehow perfect in its madness.
Yes. Well, and also it is a drag show by other means in a way. Like, it's sort of like the best thing about the Herbert novels is the way that he plays jazz with all of human culture. Like, he's always just sort of like pulling like bits and pieces from various aspects of existing human culture and recombining them into these new and interesting ideas, all premised on the idea that all human culture is just a path to fascism, one way or another. And like Lynch's film is so rich with sort of like just architecture and art and design that is in every way, it's exactly what a drag show should be. Too much culture on parade, but none of it is the culture you think that you expect to be on parade in a drag show.
And it's such an interesting thing to make, like, these women, like these wizards that are spinning a thread, like weaving a thread through time. It sort of takes so many negative stereotypes about women, that they're like scheming in the background, that they're just like playing men for puppets. It like takes this notion of, like you said, a femme fatale that is already turned. It makes these women almost like femme fatale have reached their final form, and people have like bowed before them as a result of that, and have just like accepted that they have this ability to command time by manipulating men over millennia, over generations. And that is their like actually celebrated power, in addition to being their feared power, which is a fascinating subversion.
Yes. I mean, and the thing is like, I don't know that much about Herbert, and everybody wants to bring up like, oh, he was bad to his gay son. I'm sure he was a terrible person in a lot of ways. But just taking the art on its own, saying, what if the wizards are cool not because what they do is gigantic, but because it is so small you don't see it.
Right.
Like, it really is wonderful. And it, like, there's so much in Dune the novels that is upsetting to masculinity.
Right,
that I think it's really interesting and appealing to me, because I was a strange creature. I was very, very physically large, and very, very strong. And everyone in my little farm town thought that was a big deal. And I never understood why, because I was like, this is not a power or a way of life that I have interest in. Mm-hmm. I would love to understand more about these people who are spinning a very narrow thread over the course of 10,000 years and thereby managing all of history. Like, being able to beat up one person is dumb. Mm-hmm, like, being able to control planets without anyone realizing you're doing it. That's awesome.
And looking like a car from the 1950s at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
There's something, to talk about being a person of larger scale. And it's a thing that you get in the 1984 Dune, and I think that you get really with the Baron and with the presentation of the Bene Gesserit women in that film, and some in the new one, but in that film, visibility is sort of the point of them. Like, there's not a shame in being seen. There's not a shame in being bigger than life. Like, the Baron Harkonnen he's a bad man. Like, he wants to, like, enslave the people of Arrakis and take over their natural resource.
I want you to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze.
Give me spice! Go! Show no mercy! Baron!
But the idea of visibility on parade, and I feel like for folks queer identifying who are like either looking through something that's coded or something that is overtly queer, I know for me that is on the occasions that I have felt like I could identify with a character, it feels liberating to be like, oh, but there's an example of it, because it's not something that needs to be between the lines. It can be bigger than life. And I find that very exciting.
Well, there's something the thing is if you're not used to being represented, it's possible that you being represented is going to need to brush up against some of your internalized ideas about your own invisibility. There is a really good review of The L Word from like 2002 by a woman named Alessandra D'Alessio or something like that. She's a novelist. I quoted in my book, but she talks about how lesbians being represented, lesbians watching it brace at it because it is taking away some of your wildness some of your, like, it's not capturing everything and it's not getting like the ineffable. But there's also just the way that, like, any of us, regardless of your identity, regardless of the package that you're moving through society in, we are all coded by the same society. Mm-hmm. When they show Giedi Prime in Lynch's Dune, that's the planet that the Baron is in charge of. Like, everyone there looks like at least a third of their genes came directly from the Baron. They have his red hair and his, like, portly white face. And everyone has, like, a little cap over their heart so that if he wants to, he can pull the cork out of their system and have them bleed to death in front of him. And it's so upsetting and unsettling. But also, it's his whole world that is built for him and where he matters the most.
You are so beautiful, my Baron. Your skin, love to me. Your diseases, lovingly cared for all eternity.
And there's something so wonderful about getting to imagine that world where the weight and constraints of the world that doesn't have a place, like, of there being a world that has a place for you, even if it does have to be unholy or disgusting. And it really was, a journey in my life of going from bristling at that to really enjoying and taking delight in, like, his hedonistic, amoral planet, like, that played by his rules.
All right, it's time now for a quick break, but we've got lots more coming up with Guy Branum and David Lynch's Dune. So stay with us.
Did your neighbor back into your car?
Bring that case to Judge Judy.
Think the mailman might be the real father?
Give that one to Judge Mathis.
But does your mom want you to flush her ashes down the toilet at Disney World when she passes away?
Now that's my jurisdiction. Welcome to the court of Judge John Hodgman, where the people are real, the disputes are real, and the stakes are often unusual.
If I got arrested for dumping your ashes in the Jungle Cruise, it would be an honor.
I don't want to be part of somebody getting a super yacht.
I don't know at what point you want to go into this, but we've had a worm bin before.
Available free right now at MaximumFun.org.
Judge John Hodgman, the court of last resort when your wife won't stop pretending to be a cat and knocking the clean laundry over.
Hey, kid. Your dad tell you about the time he broke Stephen Dorff's nose at the Kids' Choice Awards?
In Dead Pilot Society, scripts that were developed by studios and networks but were never produced are given the table reads they deserve.
When I was a kid, I had to spend my Christmas break filming a PSA about angel dust. So yeah, being a kid sucks sometimes.
Presented by Andrew Reich and Ben Blacker. Dead Pilot Society, twice a month on MaximumFun.org.
You know, the show you like, that hobo with the scarf who lives in a magic dumpster.
Doctor Who?
Yeah!
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm your host, Jordan Crucchiola, here with Guy Branum, talking about a movie after my own heart, David Lynch's wild 1984 adaptation of Dune. A conversation that I feel like I have with people so often about like talking about queerness in horror, queerness in genre, is that notion of like when you were saying if it's a split between being pathetic and unholy, I'd rather be unholy. And then there's the notion of like, you know, I identify with the monster, but at the same time, if I identify with the monster, I'm identifying with power. Mm-hmm. I'm identifying with the thing that sort of has its way with the world around it, the world that rejected it. And so instead of like spurning the monster, I choose to rejoice in the power of that monstrosity.
Yeah. It can be sometimes hard for me to identify with stuff that is connecting with just the primal because I am such a thinky person.
Right.
And the Baron is so primal, but through a lens of scheming and organization, you know?
The through line to the Baron and the Reverend Mother is definitely scheming.
Yeah.
Is that a through line to you? Do you, like you said, do you still perhaps, you know, like in your town where like the idea of being able to beat up one person growing up, being able to be powerful on the football field is considered, has its own currency, but you're like, I would rather control worlds over the course of 10,000 years and have nobody know about it. Are you still seeking to control worlds through 10,000 years of scheming?
Yeah, and I don't think I'm as good at it as other people are. I think some people come to it very, very naturally. Mm-hmm. But I just love and worship it. Mm-hmm. Like I am somebody who intellectualizes everything.
Sure.
I have so frequently tried to use the intellectual as a bridge to get to the anti-intellectual. And I don't know if that's effective, but it's just who I am. Like, I'm not really going to feel represented or excited about something that is wholesale brutal. Okay, I have a question for you. Have you seen The Power of the Dog?
Yes, I have. I have.
Because I think that's such an interesting movie.
What little lady made these?
Actually, I did, sir.
I can't be either of those characters because I am not thin enough to be coldly rational.
Right.
And I am not, broad of shoulder enough and narrow of hips enough to pass for good old cowboy. Like, at the end of the day, my only option is to be a slavering baron, who understands that he only gets power if he controls the spice. Like, at the end of the day, I want him to control the spice because he's gonna get better at getting it. Like, if it weren't for like Paul being like the Messiah, like the Baron needs power bad enough that he's gonna find a way to get it, and I respect that. And like I understand that, like, my association to the Bene Gesserit can at best be by analogy. Like, Cody Smith McPhee could put on a cute little dress and pass capably for a Bene Gesserit witch. I never can. And that is why I, like, my love for and investment in the Baron Harkonnen can never go away. Because given the options before me, like, that's the only bitch I can be that gives me some options.
Right. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about in the context of like what a thing I saw coming around, like renewed with the second, with the new Dune coming out, and then like bringing up like how the Baron Harkonnen is this like terrible pillar of fat phobia. Mm-hmm. And this, a thing that is so tricky about this conversation is that like, well, but what, like you said, like, what if my only option is to leverage these certain things about myself to have the level of authority or self-determination or, world-eating power?
Yeah.
What if, like, these are the only tools afforded to me as a fat gay man in this world? And what if I just have to make the most of the tools that I have? Like, it's such a, how does the fat phobia conversation around that character sit with you?
Okay, so the thing I find most fascinating about it is the anxiety around a fully integrated identity for that character. Mm-hmm. That essentially, in a movie like where Timothée Chalamet is playing our hero, like everyone else is the best of actors. And of course, they couldn't get a fat actor to play the Baron Harkonnen because they had to get the best of actors. And there are no fat the best of actors. Because
of course. That's why we need to make Colin Farrell the Penguin in a Batman movie.
Because fat actors can't find their way up the ladder of actoring unless they're, Paul Walker Hauser or whatever his name is, who is a very fine actor, but who has to play pathetic in I, Tonya, and has to play pathetic in the Richard Jewell movie, and has to play different flavors of fat pathetic for us. And also good old boys straight. We can have fat guys who are good old boys straight.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is we can't be like halted from exploring this character by the fat phobia inherent in it. If we've been able to figure out Shylocks and Othellos for 500 years, who managed to, I'm sorry, is there a role written for a woman before 1970 that's good and human? And yet our greatest actresses managed to take these roles and turn them into something far elevated from the character and the lines that they had. But what is fascinating to me about the Baron Harkonnen is the need to divorce the fatness from the character. To make, everyone else in Dune gets to be a character embodied by a human being. And the Baron Harkonnen has to be half amazing actor, half puppet.
Yeah.
Because that cannot be physically integrated into the body of the person who is performing it, lest we think that person we need that to be something abject. Because we can't imagine having to identify with them as a full person and not a cartoon or a puppet. And I so associate it with the way that when we represent fat people in media, we cut off their heads. There's that standard shot in a news story about the obesity epidemic where you just see people from their shoulders down to their hips and they're rolling globs of fat. Again, a thing I talk about in my book. I'm sorry I repeat myself.
That's okay.
But I just think that exploring what would be so dangerous about having to look upon a Baron who was an actual fat gay guy and think our fear is having to see him as human. And what would come of if we had to see this character as human? If someone as good as Stellan Skarsgård had to try to act with this character as human, what might we see there that we don't want to see? And I think that that's what we have been able to find in Othello or in Shylock or in Kate from Taming of the Shrew or any of the other representations of women that are limited on the page.
You mentioned when you grow up, at the very outset, it was when you exist as somebody who has to sort of graft yourself onto places that you might not necessarily fit in order to find you because of the dearth of examples. As somebody who has, gone on to have such a varied and prolific creative career, I wondered how, and this is one of the things I hope to explore most in these kinds of conversations, is the fact that there's to me a kind of creative genius that is fostered through having to practice from such an early age that kind of storytelling in your mind. And I wondered how that process in like the intersections of the ways in which you have not found yourself on screen, how that has affected your work as a creator yourself.
Well, it's very interesting because for the first 10 years of my writing career, maybe 7, I pretty much, like, a lot of it was writing for women, and having to be able to put my mind and my identity in their heads. And that was very natural for me because I was used to identifying with women in media. They were the closest people I had access to, who made sense to me and approached the world as I did. And I think it has made me somebody who is nimble in their capability of writing comedy from different perspectives and trying to put myself into the mind and heart of different characters. The bad part of it is I am still very bad about seeing myself in stories. Like, I am still very bad in writing for myself because what was really hard in Hollywood is that for maybe the first 5 or 7 years that I was going out and talking to people about pitching TV shows, they would be like, what's your story? We want to know your story.
Right.
But the thing is once I told them my story, they didn't want that. They wanted some straight guy's story, you know? And at the end of the day, they wanted me to write a show for ladies. And I sort of internalized that and was like, that is how I will make my business. And then as the world got better, through the work of, many people, but me included. And the thing about stand-up, the wonderful thing about stand-up is that for me, the kind of stand-up that I like is unalterably about who you are. So in stand-up, I was always representing myself and my truth in all of its forms as much as possible, and I loved that. But when it came to scripted stuff, it was like, at best, I could be a friend. At best, I am near the story. And when people actually started to... Last year, I wrote a pilot for NBC that they ended up not making, but it was about me and my family. And it was a really interesting challenge to have to say, how does this story center on someone like me? How do I occupy the space at the center? And I think there's also that really interesting thing that comes with queerness or being from a marginalized group of like understanding the strength, beauty, and liberty of being at the periphery, of being one of the people who's commenting, but not really knowing how to see the story as yours. Because, I have been in 2 romantic comedies. I play the sassy best friend in both of them.
Sure.
And like, I'm used to that and I'm good with that. But also having to ask yourself, what's your story is hard when you've only ever been able to see yourself as the scheming witch or the violent, salivating villain.
I think that gets to something that I was listening to another podcast that you had done where you sort of address the room a bit because there's an audience and you're like, the thing that straight people don't realize for gay people is that no one showed us how to do this. I feel like Gen Z has a bit more of those options and avenues of like models and ways of being like, okay, if I put myself into here, like I can see how this path works. But for a fat gay man growing up in a rural area to see like the Baron Harkonnen and to see the Reverend Mother and be like, listen, nobody gave me a better fucking route than this.
Yes.
So like, this is what I'm doing.
Absolutely. And the thing is what's interesting is so many of the things that queer kids now do have to look to are a little heteronormative and a little dishonest. And, I'm sure they are invaluable to them.
Yeah.
But there was something really interesting about having to make your way blind, just feeling for the next thing that felt relevant and sort of being, not until decades later being like, oh, that's why I loved Mrs. Robinson from The Graduate that much. Or like, oh, that's why I loved the Baron Harkonnen. It's just sort of, it's like when you have to find yourself in things that aren't made for you, like that's a really powerful and good skill set. And it's why I really chafe at people like erasing my marginalization doesn't help you at all. Like it doesn't do anything to advance your journey. And like so much of what my journey has been is people saying this. Why don't you identify with this? Why don't you like this? And it's like, no. And there are things where I really should have grown up and known that I had enough distance to be able to appreciate them. But like fucking Westerns, I still kind of don't like a Western. Like no women are going to talk to each other in most Westerns, you know?
No, you have to make it straight up like the movie with Britt Marling and Haley Steinfeld, where they're just like three women in a house together with no one else until the men come to hurt them.
Yes. No, and like there's so much of that stuff. Or just like on a plane in the last couple of years, I started watching Braveheart. There's 25 goddamn minutes before a woman talks. Like, you know, it's insane. And asking me to find my identity within those spaces is like deeply oppressive and terrible.
This is violence.
And it is violence because it's asking people, it's saying, all right, go through life with no tools that are for you. Here are a bunch of tools that aren't for you. Use them. And it's like, well, if I'm going to have to use tools that aren't for me, I'm going to find ones that fit better.
Yeah. Here's a bunch of materials to wash a car. Go build a house with that.
Right. Exactly. And it's, you know, like, I think that conversations about cultural appropriation are important and need to be had, but I also think as applied to queer people need to be looked at differently because looking for things outside of ourselves has always been necessary because we don't have things. And the thing is that doesn't mean that queer people shouldn't be respectful of that distance and understand that there are things that they won't understand. But, you know, like at the end of the day, like I see far more reflections of myself in The Color Purple than I do, I don't know, Cinderella Man.
Yeah.
Or any movie where like Spielberg or Ron Howard are talking about a guy just trying to make his way.
Well, I will keep stretching time because I just want to keep asking you questions because I can't do that anymore. What should we send people off in the direction of your work that you would like to tell them about today, Guy? What should we say?
If you're in Los Angeles, I am doing my first hour since before the pandemic on April 29th. So please come to that. I would really appreciate it. My book, My Life as a Goddess, goes over a lot of the issues that are here. And then also this September, a movie that I'm in. Actually, can we talk about that a little bit? Just briefly. I'm in this movie, Bros. It is a rom-com written by and starring Billy Eichner. But Billy cast me as his friend in the movie. And it is a role no one else would have given to me. It is like a fat gay guy who has a sex life and is funny and isn't sad about anything and is having a good time. And it's like, it was just so lovely that it happened because like, so frequently when I get cast in things, it is as a representation of sort of the pathetic.
Yeah.
And that like Billy didn't see that his story would be hurt by, but rather would be helped by having me as somebody who's happily single and has like a sex life and, you know, all of those things it was very sweet and really, you know, made me happy to have him as a friend and a colleague. Yeah. But in the context of these stories, it's so nice to see people moving a little bit outside of that.
I am so glad to know that you can celebrate the Baron and that you can, through a friend, you can be just the man that you are and the man that you live as in roles coming to you. And so I'm really glad to have the combination of those notes in this conversation. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about it today, Guy. This has been as intellectually rigorous, honestly, as I was looking forward to it being.
Jordan, it was really fun. Let's also be honest with the audience. I was 20 minutes late for no good reason, and I apologize profusely for that. But also, I would like to say that both I and my character in Bros, Henry, given the option, would try to take over a planet full of spice. Like,
You would be all the fat gay that you could be and leverage that to the maximum.
Any terms, like, by any means necessary to get that spice.
Here's to the 10,000-year quiet reign of Guy Branum. Let's hear it, everybody. Take a moment to yourselves and give a round of applause for Guy Branum and that, the most at once entertaining and rigorous conversation about the Baron Harkonnen. I'm going to say that you've heard at least this week, if not this year, if not in many years. I'm really looking forward to checking out Bros later this year, seeing, by Guy's own description, him as we haven't really quite had an opportunity to see him before in a film. And if you want to check him out in the meantime, check out My Life as a Goddess, because why wouldn't you want a book called My Life as a Goddess in your own life? And you know what? New Dune, Villeneuve's Dune, it's on HBO Max. We know that. But get out there and seek out the maximalist 9-layer dessert that is David Lynch's Dune. I think there's a lot to offer from that movie. It gets kicked around a lot. It's a bit of a cinematic punching bag, and I endeavor to change that insofar as I can. My sphere of influence can make a difference. Before we go today, I do have one quick thing I promised to address with you, and that is the matter of Amazon Prime's new show Reacher, which is an adaptation of the book series by Lee Child, the Jack Reacher novels. Previously, we have seen 2 films adapted from the Child novels that starred Tom Cruise. I love those movies. The first one, legitimately a fucking tremendous action movie. The attitude of it, the sense of humor of it. I understand, fans, that in the text, Jack Reacher is a huge man. He's a huge man. Tom Cruise, famously petite. But that man is a movie star on the order of basically no one else we have left in American cinema today. And while he may be small, he fills the screen with his presence. So I don't want to hear any haterade coming by way of Tom Cruise's Jack Reacher. But the series is what we're here to discuss today. And that series stars Alan Ritchson, a mountain of a man, a gorgeous mountain of a man in the titular role as the Army veteran who has as a list of accolades as long as your leg, who is famous within the service for being an Army investigator who has solved innumerable crimes. I don't think he's ever not had a successful conviction. He's like Sherlock Holmes if Sherlock Holmes was Zeus. And the incredible action writer, commenter, thinker, Vice Victus of the Action for Everyone podcast, to me, described Alan Ritchson perfectly in his dimensions, which is, he called him fuck huge. And I think that is the scientific term for the scope of Alan Ritchson. And this is a beautiful man. And he does a great job with the Reacher sense of humor, with the deadpan, with the dryness of the delivery. This show is fun. It's compelling. It's a mystery. It's crime. It's action. It's seeing a fuck huge man beat anyone nearly to death that he wants to, just like on command. He's an unbeatable. I think in the book his hands are described as being the size of like raw chickens. Like that is the kind of mass you can expect from a Reacher, and he embodies it. But a fun little thing has come along with the Reacher conversation, and that is on Action Twitter. There has been this like delightful, apparently irrepressible thirst for Alan Ritchson among some of my favorite action dudes who are talking about the medium and the art form on the internet all the time. And I just love to see a man whose beauty and whose entire energy so resonates with these ostensibly, perhaps traditionally, heterosexual individuals that they can't but catastrophically thirst for Alan Ritchson in the, in this context, safe confines of the internet. The internet it's not always a safe set of confines, but for people who want to openly thirst about hot celebrities, it's a pretty inviting landscape. And it is, there's that sense of as a queer woman, you know, there's that thing with queer teen girls where, you know, there's the pretty girl in school or the, you know, the hot girl you have a crush on, but it's just like, they're just really cool, you know? I just want to hang out with them, you know? I just really like, it would be cool to be them, you know? I just think they're really awesome, which is all like coded developing sexuality for I want to kiss, touch, absorb, be in physical proximity to this person, and I have a lot of feelings around them, but I can only describe them as just like how aspirational and cool they are. That is like heavy notes of that are imbuing the conversation of dudes talking about how much they love the Reacher show. And I would just like to say yes. I would like to say we celebrate you. I would like to say you are safe. I would like to say please embrace the gorgeous homoeroticism that defines action cinema. There is almost nothing more gay than a straight man. And I would just like to see this landscape of action genre loving dudes settle in to the gigantic arms of their favorite action heroes and just curl up like a warm blanket, get comfortable and settle into the fact that this thirst is great. This thirst is beautiful. I invite you to do it more. And I invite us all to keep creating a safe terrain for catastrophic Twitter thirsting, you know, drive over me with a car, Alan Ritchson, like send me into credit card debt, Alan Ritchson, swaddle me in your big muscles, Alan Ritchson. I want to see that for all the men who feel the truth of it in their hearts. So thank you, Reacher, for drawing this kind of drawing a small liberation movement out of your performance and in your show. And so that is my one quick thing before we go today. And that's our show. You can follow us on Twitter at Feeling Seen-Pod, or you can join our Facebook group where you can thirst about Alan Ritchson together at www.facebook.com/groups/FeelingSeen-Pod. You can also send us an email at feelingseen@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me, I am Jorcrew on Twitter, where I will relate to you gents out there about how gorgeous Alan Ritchson is. And our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher. And this is a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned. Audience supported.